Across the wasteland of the Fallout universe, there's plenty of locations that could be classed as the worst place to live. However, there is one particular spot that stands out above all the rest. Ladies and gentlemen, in this video, we're taking a look at the dark history of the Pit. Now, I know a lot of you are probably here because of the release of the Pit expeditions for Fallout 76, which follows a power struggle between the Union and the Fanatics. But let me tell you guys, there's a lot more to the Pit's history than this little chapter, so we're going to have to dig a little bit deeper. To truly understand the Pit and why it was so horrific to live there, we need to take a look at two major contributing factors, one being the environment and the other being the social structure. But before we dive into that, let's just take a look at what the Pit actually was for those who aren't familiar with it. Before the Great War of 2077, the settlement known as the Pit was actually the city of Pittsburgh, and it were known all across America for its steel industry. Now then, on the day the bombs dropped, like many other cities across the US, Pittsburgh had more hits than Tina Turner, which understandably caused quite a lot of chaos. Chaos which street gangs would take advantage of. These gangs quickly took over what were left of Pittsburgh and eventually they became raiders. And by 2103, they had complete control of the city, as well as enslaving most of its population. Now you probably think that living in a raider-controlled city would be bad enough. However, there was a far more deadly enemy, which leads us nicely onto our first major point, the environment. The environment of the Pit was one of the reasons why it was such an hellhole, and it were truly unique to this region. When the fiery little fellows from China struck the city, all the resulting radiation and fallout mixed in with all the pollution created by the steelworks. This deadly combination caused the Pit to become a literal hellscape, with the rivers becoming especially affected, leading them to cause health issues for years to come. Now on the lower end of the scale, the health issues were things like mutations, you know, an extra limb growing from somewhere it shouldn't. Higher up on the scale, however, were neurological and genetic issues. One of the more nasty neurological conditions caused the afflicted to descend into what can be described as an aggressive, almost animalistic state. These people were called the Wildmen, and they'd literally wander around in packs attacking anybody that they saw. Now then, as well as the Wildmen, there was another form of genetically devolved human knocking around, and if you've played the Fallout 3 Pit DLC or Fallout 76 Expeditions, you will have encountered these aggressive little buggers. Of course, we're talking about Trogs. Now some of you may be wondering, what the bloody hell is a Trog? Well, if you give me a minute, I'll tell you. Trogs again were humans that were suffering from a genetic condition. In this case, the troglodyte degeneration contagion, or TDC for short. And much like the Wildmen, Trogs had descended from human beings into mindless, animalistic creatures. They became hunchbacked and lost all semblance of what it was to be a human. Everybody who lived in the Pit was at risk of developing TDC, with newborn infants being especially susceptible. So by now, you should have some idea how harsh it was inside the Pit. So let's move on to another factor which made the city such a bloody awful place. The society of the Pit, as mentioned earlier on in the video, was quite simple. Raiders at the top, slaves at the bottom. Now a totally bit of random trivia for your ear. If you want to meet some former slaves of the Pit, or at least former Pit inhabitants, head on over to Foundation in Fallout 76. All the settlers that you find there, including Page himself, escaped from the Pit. But anyway, I digress. Raider gangs have been the dominant force in the Pit since the end of the Great War, and nothing had changed about that until the year 2255, when for some strange reason the Brotherhood of Steel appeared outside of Pittsburgh. Now you may be thinking this would be a turning point for the Pit, and it was, but not a positive one. For reasons unknown to anybody, the Brotherhood decided to wipe out half of the city's residents. This event would be known as the Scourge. Now, like I said, nobody knows why Paladin Owen Lyons decided to attack the city, but what we do know is it created a power vacuum. A power vacuum which would be filled by a very unlikely person. During the Scourge, the Brotherhood lost one single man. Just one, an initiate by the name of Ishmael Asher. Now then, Asher's squad mates witnessed a building collapsing from underneath him, so naturally, they thought he were dead. However, due to a magical thing called power armor, he actually survived. When he was awoken by a scavenger trying to pull off his power armor, giggity, he saw that he was inside a still, fully functioning, pre-war steel mill. But that's not all he saw. Oh no, he saw an opportunity. Over the following months and years, he started recruiting scavengers and also started to rebuild the city, as well as its immense steel industry. And as you can imagine, guys, this netted him a massive profit. Unfortunately for the Pit, Lord Asher, as he was now called, wasn't much better than the Raiders. He was actually quite a cruel guy. He enslaved most of the population to work in the steel mills and used what were left of the raider gangs to enforce his dominance. So yeah, new ruler, but still the same old status quo. With Asher in charge, not even the people outside of the pit were safe. He used his vast amount of wealth to buy in slave labour and to bolster his military ranks. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, why did he buy slave labour from outside the pit? Why didn't he just use the inhabitants of the city? Well, he did, but remember that little disease that I told you about, TDC, and how newborns were especially susceptible to it? Well, funnily enough, this put people off having kids, and Asher himself discouraged it. So buying in slave labour and recruiting soldiers from outside of the pit became the main way that the city, sustained its population. See, this is why I say the pit is truly the most horrific place in the wasteland, but anyhow, the future of the pit is unclear, and there's two ways that it could go, and you get to decide this in the Fallout 3 Pit DLC. The first option is to overthrow Lord Asher. If you go down this route, you'll be siding with a man called Werner, who himself is actually a former pit raider, but he does forget to mention that. The reason he's no longer a raider is because he tried to launch a coup against Asher, who in turn for his treachery turned him into a slave. Werner's goal is to take control of the city and find a cure for TDC, which he believes Asher has. In actual fact, Asher does have what you could call a cure for TDC. However, it's not what you'd expect. It's actually his newborn baby daughter, who's been born with no signs of genetic deficiencies or TDC. Now then, to keep this video short and sweet and not 72 hours long, I'm going to cut the story down here. If you follow Werner's plan through to the end, he ends up overthrowing Asher and becoming the overlord of the pit, I guess the right word is. He achieves this by instigating a riot and getting you to turn off the power which supplies the floodlights in Haven and Uptown, which in turn allows the Trogs to massacre all the raiders that live there. If however, you decide to side with Asher, the riot would be put down, the floodlights would never get turned off, and Werner's plan would fail. So I ask you guys, whose side would you take? I will say though, before you put it down in the comments, both Asher and Werner tried to work on a cure for TDC. More surprisingly though, both Asher and Werner keep people working in the steel mills. So yeah, let me know down in the comments. As ever guys, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to all my Patreons and my channel members. The extra support is much appreciated. If that's something that any of you want to be interested in, the link's down in description, along with all the links to my socials too. And as ever, if you did like the video, please hit that thumbs up button, let me know I'm doing an half decent job, and if you want to see more weekly Fallout content, hit that subscribe button too. Anyway, as we say it north, I'll love you and leave you, and I'll catch you next one.